Okay, good morning, everyone. How are you? I'm Mary Preenon. I'm the Director of Communications for the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors. Thank you once again for joining us for our virtual breakfast with benefits. And today we have a really great, exciting topic called Organization and Moving Made Simple. If anyone has ever moved themselves or helped their clients moved, it can be a crazy, crazy day. And we have two ladies here who are going to make this very simple for us. I'm going to start out by introducing our presenter and sponsor for this, Dale Klein, the Managing Director of Continuum. And I will let Dale, say a few words about her business, and she will be introducing Sonia. So Dale, you can have the floor.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Mary, Kathleen, thank you for giving us the opportunity. So my name is Dale Klein. As Mary mentioned, I live in Rye. I'm right in Westchester County. I have a husband who's from Argentina. My son's 12. Funny enough, Sonia and I happen to have both have dogs, and we independently named our dogs Finn. So that's just a funny in common point. I've worked in household good moving, relocation focus for over 30 years. I've lived across the globe. I've moved many times myself, both by myself and with a family and with a pet. So know how easy it can be, and I know how chaotic it can get. So anything that we can do to help simplify that would be great. And I think that that's a key point both for Sonia and myself, is having experienced this, it's easy to manage. It's easy to help people to understand why they're moving, where their thought pattern is and what are their needs. So we're excited about that. I currently today am working for a firm called Continuum International. I oversee all aspects of the moving and relocation for our clients, making sure that the key points are touched upon. So I'm excited to share that with you. We're in Danbury, Connecticut. And as we go through the presentation, maybe I can share a little bit more about the moving and key points that might help you and your clients. But with that, I'd like to introduce a very dear friend, Sonia, and let her share with you some of her background and her expertise.
Thank you all. It's wonderful to see you in these new forums of being on Zoom. So thank you for sharing it and enjoying time together. I am Sonia Weissappel, and Dale and I have been girlfriends since we kind of started in the relocation industry. And so I'm an entrepreneur, and I started a business in 1993 when I graduated from college and could not actually figure out how to write a resume. So I started a company instead of writing a resume. And having an aunt who is an architect, interior designer, a mother who managed her office, another aunt that was a geriatric nurse, and an uncle that sold commercial real estate. I kind of grew up with people and their life transitions. And I created a company that services people and their stuff during life transitions. And that's Seriatim. Seriatim means in a series. It's a series of steps to become organized. Our logo is a circle at the far right, and it's at the far left. It's that circle at its furthest point, cut in half. And that's normally how I find my clients, with their hair aflames, in not a great state of mind because of some major life transition. I am a mother of a 16-year-old daughter who goes to school in Harlem, public school, and I have a dog, and I have a sweet husband, and we have a frog, which Dale got rid of her frog, but I need to get rid of my frog. And I've been running my company since 1993, and I incorporated in 99. So it's been a long journey of organizing and serving the real estate industry and fixing all those situations that come up for them. So
did you want to see this?
Say it again? Oh, that's not for us, is it? Okay. So a good relationship, as Dale and I have had over these years, is actually what really serves to help people in a life transition. All of you have been doing this for some time, and really what, perhaps consciously or unconsciously, you already do it. You call upon people. It takes a village to move someone. It takes a village to get the listing ready for market. It takes a lot of moving parts. And from our own life experiences of moving, it's not something you can do completely by yourself, without wanting your hair, your hair falling out kind of thing. So you in the real estate industry, most of you, I'm assuming, are working on getting listings. You either get the listing or you bring in the buyer. But when you get the listing, there are circumstances where you've jumped through 150 hurdles to get that listing. You finally have someone who is going to give you an exclusive, and you're going to be able to make commission on selling that space. But sometimes that space is like a little Pandora's box, because you walk into the space. Dale, can we go to the next one, please? You walk into the space and you're like, oh, okay, I've gotten the client's approval. I can do this. But now you're looking at all of their life, and their life spills out of closets, drawers, it's on surfaces. They live in a way that perhaps is not your way, and perhaps is not your buyer's way, but it's their way. And there should be no judgment around it. But in the industry of real estate in Manhattan and in the tri-state area, I have found that most sales for when the listing comes to market that go the most effortlessly are when the space is as neutral as possible. And by neutral, I mean, if you got a contract within a short period of time, that client would be ready to move. These pictures, I hope everyone can see some of these pictures. These pictures, these clients are all getting their, these are actual jobs that we're working on this month. These are real estate brokers brought these jobs to us. They're each moving for different reasons. One is an estate, and the other, well, actually both are an estate, but one was going through a divorce, but then the spouse passed away. So it's kind of a divorce and an estate, but it was a family home. And the other one was a family home of 50 years, but the parents passed away. And the real estate brokers in each of these circumstances said, can't do it. Can't sell this space for you this way. You've got to get it ready. It's not going to fetch as much money. And here we are. So if you walk into a space like this, there's always going to be a discussion about what stays and what goes. Everything is precious to a client in this circumstance, but from your point of view as the agent or the real estate kind of maven, you're going to need to figure out what's going to make that listing really pop. And some people say, clear it out completely. Other people say, we're going to clear it out completely and put something in there like rented furniture and stage it. Others say, okay, we can deal with the sofa and the TV and the sideboard, but all the little stuff's got to go. So that is a problem for most people who lived like this, because if they knew how to do that, they would have done it before they gave you the listing. And they don't know how to do it. So now they start asking you what to do. And because they're asking you what to do, either you're going to need to help them, or they're going to need to be given a list and a resources. So let's go over some little tips of what we can do. We can go to the next slide, Dale. Dale, can we? Oh, there we are. So at the pre-listing walkthrough, you've determined whether or not something is going to stay or go. And you've also probably talked about what the life transition is. In the life transition, those life transitions are very much hot points for how emotional they are in that circumstance. If it's a divorce and they're separating items, you're going to have a harder time typically having clarity on what can stay and go, because every piece of furniture could be very well electrically charged with people's emotions in that divorce scenario. So having someone make a list and hand a piece of paper room by room and saying, keep the sofa, keep the coffee table, eliminate everything else, will neutralize for that warring couple the circumstance. Making a list and making clarity on what you need as the broker in that space to make it pop, you're the only one who can do that. And after that, having an organizer or an interior decorator or even a mover come in and lift up and take out what is not needed in that space is the next stage. But having determined with all the parties that be, because a real estate agent is a trusted advisor. You guys are in a very precious circumstance where they're trusting you often with their largest financial asset, and they're looking for your advice. And that advice is, how do I make the most of this sale, and what is the shortest distance between where I am and where I need to go? And you know what it needs to look like. They don't know how to get it there. So trying to make the shortest, a small list, and then figuring out what vendors need to come into play and what the budget is. All of those pieces can either be handled by you, which I'm sure most of you have unfortunately been in those circumstances. Dale and I have each been in those circumstances, but together we know that a lot of third-party vendors, it makes it much easier to get from those hair of flame situations into a peaceful transition. And those vendors have to be a mover. They can be a shredder. They can be someone to digitally transform the contents of memorabilia. But in order to even do any of those vendor managements, you've had to get it a little organized. And people don't always even know how to get it organized. So has anyone ever worked with an organizer or done any of that work on their own? Mary, do you know if anyone's worked with an organizer? Oh, she's on mute.
Sometimes I know people we have clients that do like organization and things like that, but I don't know if anybody wants to, somebody just put in the chat, they have a great organizer.
Good.
You know, and I was going to just ask a question about, you know, when you were showing those homes, a lot of it to me looked like it's almost on the verge of being like a hoarder. And how do you deal with something like that when you're getting a listing and it's, say, a beautiful house, but they've got all this junk? I mean, it's probably an issue.
It's a major issue. That's the point of this conversation, frankly, because a hoarder is very different. Yes, those are collectors, and it's a very distinct difference, because a hoarder is someone who has had some major emotional trauma, a life transition, which is often where my world as an organizer and some of the organizers on the call, Dale as a mover, and then the real estate agent, a life transition is where the three of us as entities all intersect. We all have to play in the same sandbox and figure out how to serve that person who is having a pain. And that pain could be the estate, it could be a divorce, it could be, I just want a new, bigger home because we have 3 kids. It could be we're empty nesting and we want a smaller home. So whatever the life transition is, that's where we all intersect. Some people say, I'm going to do it all myself. And it may take you months to get that listing onto the market because they don't actually do the homework that needs to be done. Circumstances like those photographs, they have a huge collection. It's a lot to work through. It's like this car in this image. There's a lot of stuff. People drag around a lot of stuff. A hoard is a very different scenario. We do 2 hoards in a year for my company because they're very exhausting. And hoards tend to be when someone was traumatically hurt or abused in some ways, and it tends to be dirtier, and where they sleep is not in a normal place. So it's a lot of real estate agents always call it, oh, it's a hoard, but then when you walk the hoard, you'll find that it's just a massive amount of stuff. It doesn't look like a catalog and ready for market. It's just many, 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 many years of collections in one place. A hoard is illogical in some ways, and you can't. It will take years and a lot of scooping out of things and treasure hunting to get through that. But decluttering from a normal circumstance, like a home like we all, I hope, have, is just grouping like items and making decisions. Does that outfit fit? You have all your clothes in one closet. What fits, what doesn't fit? What can I sell? What can I donate? What can I let go of? That is the normal process of purging. All organizers know how to do that. We tend to have made a business out of not only doing that, but working with trusted advisors and providing a digital inventory of people's household goods. That allows us, after we've done the purging, to figure out what actually needs to be kept and or donated or sold. And we work on getting all of those pieces together. So those are other advisors that everyone should have on their Rolodex: appraisers and resources for donation and for sale. And if you don't, you can always send my company's staff a email and we can help you figure out what to do with that. And then knowing who the best
Hey,
movers
Laura,
are.
it's Mary, how are you? I am in the middle of,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just muted someone.
Oh,
For everyone
okay.
complete, yeah. I'm sorry.
I thought it was a question coming out of left field.
No.
So and then with moving, so you've got a house on the market and you've got the listing and you've gotten your client through all the decluttering, and perhaps they've staged the space and they might have painted it, and they might have fixed the air conditioners and pulled up carpeting or done anything that makes that space sensational, and you've gotten through all those hurdles, but perhaps you didn't figure out what pieces of furniture needed to go where. And that's where Dale comes into play, because moving is not moving is very distinct. And I think what I have found over the years with handling thousands of people's life transitions, circumstance in the story, when you've done the pre-walkthrough in the beginning and you've figured out what's actually happening for everyone, what they need is they need to, ultimately, you're going to sell their space, and everything that is left, post-purging, post-sorting, everything that is left needs to go somewhere. So where are they going? What are they doing? And Dale, why don't you speak to the differences between the 3 types of services and the 2 types of storage that you offer to the real estate world?
Sure. Thank you, Sonia. So, just to touch on something that Sonia mentioned, which is an absolute gift, and for any of the other organizers that are on the call. Coming in as a mover, the first step is always doing preferably an on-site survey. And with COVID, we've all adjusted, as you all have as well, during the high points of COVID, of having to do on-site videos. There is a difference between, as a mover, walking into a home, going back to some of those pictures that Sonia showed you, when there's an organizer partnering with a mover, then the mover working just with a family. From the very first point of contact, when our estimator walks in, it will help us to be successful. Because a lot of times, if you think about it, the success of a mover is not only the team that comes to your house to pack, the customer service person that's helping you with the timing and all of the different logistical pieces. It really starts with the family. It starts with defining what are their expectations, what do they need to move, what needs to be donated, because our partnership with preferably an organizer is inexchangeable to the success of what our team does, to making sure that the right items are loaded into the right box and get to the right destination. So just really having those points of communications for yourselves as a real estate agent and maximizing an organizer is amazing for all underlying suppliers. But just touching in on the different types of moves and why people are moving. Most movers can do from point A to point B within the same town or across county, right? A local move can be as simple or as complex depending on what someone owns, what their needs are, and their reason for moving. It's a very emotional time for people. It's a time where everybody involved really needs to understand what is the reasoning. You know, someone who's downsizing, being in a home for a very, very long time, even if they're going just across town, we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of families, especially during COVID, their kids are off in college and they're going to downsize sooner than they expected to. Well, you know, going through 30 years of your belongings is emotional, and you really need to have the right team there helping you do that. Packing, labeling, inventorying, all of which, again, the movers are doing in conjunction with the organizer. Growing across country, that's a little bit trickier, just in the sense that you can't drive down the street necessarily. So planning and making sure that the key components are organized. And in many cases, when you're moving across country, your goods might be going into storage. If goods are packed well, they store well, they deliver well. And right down again to organization. They need to be inventoried correctly so that when they come out of the master bedroom, that they go right back into the master bedroom when they get delivered. Having the team from beginning to end that gives that message of continuity leads to the success of the move and minimizes the stress for the family, for the children. You know, they want to know what box teddy bear Sadie's in. It's really important to have those key points from point of communication before the mover even walks in the door. International moves. Funny enough, international moves can be scary for many people, but in a lot of situations, they're easier. And they're easier because people understand that you can't give a designated delivery date. You can't plan the move to an exact science. So again, selecting the right partner, having the right mover, and planning appropriately, especially during COVID times right now. I don't know if any of you have had a refrigerator that's broken or a dryer and needed to get a new one, and it takes unbelievable amount of time because of manufacturing being delayed, shipping being delayed. Partnering with the right international mover who really is on top of all of the logistics and all of the components. At the end of the day, a move is the same, whether it's local, national, or international. It needs to be packed. It needs to be transported, it needs to be delivered, and it needs to be unpacked. And having the mover who can explain what the differences are. And as Sonia said, this comes in all different shapes and sizes. You have people who want to pack themselves. You have people who want to unpack themselves, right? Having the communication of, do you know what that means? There is not a mover, regardless who your company is that you partner with. If the movers do not pack the box, we cannot insure it. it's really important to have that communicated, because everybody likes to pack their most precious valuables. Please don't seal the box. Very, very important. If you seal it, we can't insure it. These little details are really, truly not details. But now when it comes down to you as a partner, as a real estate agent who's getting that listing and setting up your home ready to show, it needs to be staged. Well, what do you do with the person that might be, whether they're a hoarder, a minimalist, whatever it be, that home needs to look just right. And you as the trusted advisor needs to get that set up, whether you're doing it directly with your client or have the benefit of working with an organizer, which again, will lead this family to be able to list their home and hopefully sell it in the shortest amount of time for the best marketable price that you can get. That's, you know, having a trusted mover working with yourselves or directly, preferably with the organizer, is going to allow us to put goods into short-term storage and then organize for when that family sells the home. Where do those items that are in storage go? How do they meet everything else that's going across town or nationally or internationally? Long-term storage, perhaps, as we mentioned, it could be a family that's downsizing and they have children in college and they want to save their family valuables. Long-term storage is a great option so that they know, and they've got a great inventory that you've done with your organizer, so that when those goods are ready to deliver out, you know exactly what boxes to tell the mover to pull out. So, you know, it all comes down to just that executive functioning of knowing what you're doing before you get there, so that we're not scrambling at the end. I don't know if anybody has any questions on how we do that or how we go about doing it, but certainly feel free to reach out to myself or Sonia on specifics, or, you know, feel free to populate in the chat.
Asking if you
I don't know if
do
you have any-
Yonkers and the Bronx.
Excuse me?
Someone is asking if you do moves in Yonkers and the Bronx.
Absolutely. So just a little bit about Continuum ourselves. We're headquartered in Danbury, Connecticut. We have all our own, excuse me about that. We have all our own trucks, packing materials, everything is new. We have our own teams. They're all professionally trained. We have our own estimators. It's very, very important to know the team with which you're working with. So yes, we do. There's not a point globally that we don't touch upon.
I can speak to that. I'm currently in Miami, and I have an international client who lives in Italy, who the real estate agent sold his Miami pied-à-terre. He's moving to New York in 2 years. He's not coming out of Italy. The real estate agent, in order to make the deal, needs the house emptied. I got hired to work with the art curator to lift the art, and they had called another mover, and the mover then was speaking with me as a move coordinator organizer to review the move quote, and it was stupid money, and to move him from Miami to New York. So I called Continuum, and Continuum's team is currently with me in Miami. And what the other company wanted to do in 5 days, we've accomplished in a day and a half for a fully prepped, inventoried, and reviewed with the client what's going where for that executive function. The team came in, they packed based on what it needs to be for when it gets unpacked in 2 years. So it was simple that there was no auction or trash in this circumstance or charity. Everything was being lifted and everything was going, but the client couldn't be present. But the real estate agent would lose their opportunity to close on the listing if the contents did not leave. And all the keys and all the things that the new owner purchased had to be corralled and left behind, so that the manuals and the clickers for the garage and all those things weren't packed. So that is an illustration of how brilliant it is to have the collaboration for all three of our benefits. The mover got a great job and will have storage for 2 years, and they've done right by doing a good price versus a silly price from another mover that was an outside vendor. I came down and managed it, and so the client feels represented, and the real estate agent is quite happy because their deal is going to be done on Friday and they will close. So everyone wins, and that's how this is why we're here, is because that's how it works. So yes, the Bronx and Yonkers, California, across the nation, Dale and I, Continuum and Seriatim have worked together for the last 20 plus years. There's no job too small or too large for us.
You know, an important piece as a mover is truly the communication, setting expectations for anybody involved, whether it be the real estate agent, the family, the members of the family. And it starts with what to expect, because there's many different ways a move can be done. And, you know, there's different types of movers, and it's important to talk about that. Many movers, many people think of movers when it's a van line. And so let me give you an example. You could have a move that's going from the Bronx to Los Angeles. And honestly, what will happen is you'll have a survey done, and you as a real estate agent truly needs to know what day are the movers going to have everything out, so that you can appropriately tie together all the different aspects to sell that home. And the movers working within that timeline is very, very important. And when you work with different types of movers, there's different types of logistics, whether it's a local mover, but when you're going across country, depending on the size of the move, will depend on how a van line would do that. And they will say to you that the job will pack on Monday and Tuesday, but it'll load sometime by Friday, simply because if it's not a full truck, it is not the priority to get across country. That's where selecting an independent mover plays a huge role. Now, again, an independent mover is not always the best selection, but in a situation where someone has to get their kids in school because you need to live in a certain town in Los Angeles in order to get your kids enrolled in school before it starts in September, very important that timing is done correctly. So, you know, I'll use the example of Continuum. We actually international wrap and pack all our national moves. We do that for several reasons. One, even pre-COVID, we did it, but with COVID, it's very important that you have all new packing materials. Everything is in good shape, it's clean, and it starts, you know, we follow all the rules of the CDC. You get designated pack dates, but you also get designated delivery dates, and you're setting the expectations with the family. I'm sorry, Sonia?
Dale, when just for kind of general moving 101 circumstance for anyone on the Zoom, there are circumstances where if you hire a local mover, they are, what Dale's talking about is if they used a wardrobe box yesterday and the client threw it out and it's still on their truck and now they're doing your client's pack, they may pull that wardrobe box back into circulation, but charge to use that box. Yes, it's more green to reuse that box, but there's an ick factor in it, because one thing that we haven't touched on, but which is a very important piece, is that bed bugs love to travel in other people's stuff, and you don't know, just like the CDC and COVID, you know, there is an ick piece of, if you're not using new and it's been pre-used, what actually touched it? And so when Dale talks about clean supplies, that's a really big deal in the move industry. And it's more expensive, but it's less costly in the long run for the client who did not catch bed bugs, who did not have ickiness. And also mentally, when you walk, or emotionally, I don't know the right terminology, but when you walk into a space and the boxes have been delivered and they're all crisp and clean, it's like a new set of sheets or a nice white shirt. You know, it makes you feel good. And when you're in a time when there is a lot of chaos about in a move scenario, to just see that the boxes are stacked neatly, all crisp corners, nothing crumpled and stacked and kind of broken and saggy and dented, you instantly know that your life is more protected. And that is a distinction for calling the local moving companies that turn something and may not actually give you the true price. They may quote it over the phone and say that that move is going to cost $3,000 and your client's all excited that it's going to cost this. But what they didn't say is that it's going to cost them another $6,000 when they're present and their stuff is on the truck. And so knowing that you have a trusted advisor, that you know key players in the company, and they're not just salespeople trying to make their commission and make the deal. Having done this for almost 30 years, I've lived and learned, and I happen to be the head of the Relocation Society of New York for the past 20 years. So there really is not a mover that I don't know in the tri-state area. But I choose to work with Continuum for a lot of reasons. And so I would highly recommend that. Also, the pricing of storage. If we talk about storage, people often say, I'm going to put my stuff in storage. What they do is, if Dale talked about an owner packing a box and no insurance, that's fine. You put your stuff in storage yourself. There's no insurance on that once it's delivered, unless you've told your insurance company that your stuff is in storage. Sometimes sprinklers go off. Something goes wrong in storage. That's a problem if you didn't have your items insured. But a mover's storage, making a list with a mover's storage, the distinction is that you can't visit your stuff at a mover's storage. Whereas a Westies or an Extra Space or a Public Storage or Manhattan Mini, you can visit your stuff 24 hours a day. You can go sleep with your stuff. But at a mover storage, you can't. So that's also part of that executive function of being prepared for the move and making the right choice for the overall life transition, because just to throw it into storage is not always the right answer. But Continuum offers those short and long-term storage, but you can't touch your stuff. But it is safe and it is insured and it is going to remain clean and crisp. Others, not so much, not so often. So anyone has any questions about that, you know, I can talk about moving until we're all gray.
Yeah, just a small piece to touch upon that's also important is to ask the question, when your client picks a mover, what happens when a problem happens? And that is really what separates movers, aside from the quality of just packing the box, is knowing if something breaks, damaged, or lost, that it's going to be taken care of. Moving is not inexpensive, and you want to know that you can trust your partner here, which is handling and holding all of your prized possessions. So knowing how a claim will be handled is very, very important. Continuum ourselves, we actually self-insure through a company called Unirisk, and we probably have one of the lowest, not probably, definitely have one of the lowest claims in the industry. And the reason behind that is because of how we pack our jobs. So just this photo is very succinct in what Sonia mentioned. This is what all the boxes look like. What you're looking at there probably is a chair, a filing cabinet, a lounge chair. You know, there's a variety of items there. Glassware, where you'll see at the very back where the arrows are pointing up, and it's very clear as to what those items are. It's very important that movers know what to expect once they pack a box, so that when they're loading it into a truck, fragile things are on top, not on the bottom. And that comes,
Yeah, you're right, because sometimes if the lampshade is in a box and it doesn't fill the whole box, and no one packed it internationally or as well, the corners sag and someone puts the heavy china box on top of that fragile medium box and it sits down, and then you get to go to unpack the lampshade and it looks like an accordion and it's all cracked. The team who packed isn't necessarily always the whole team that will load out. So the language of what boxes were used and how it is labeled is key communication to those who pick it up and transport it.
Absolutely. We work with real estate agents all the time. And a big part of what we do is coming in and making the home look, you know, spectacular, like it's in a Vogue magazine. Well, how do you do that? You have to take out probably 75% of what a family uses in their day-to-day activity. And when you're taking those items, you know, it could be family heirlooms, family china. Some of these things can't be replaced. Even if insurance will cover for pairs and sets and reimburse someone, it's not about that. It's the sentimental attachment to some of these items. So you want to know that the best effort's been made to pack these things and have that with no noise. It's moving and selling a home is just a very emotional, difficult time, right? It's one of those top 4 stressors or 5 stressors in life. So if you have any questions on how we go about approaching it, you know, you come across a client, you're just not sure how to help them in getting organized, feel free to reach out to Sonia or myself. You know, sometimes just having a conversation can help direct some of these organizational points that are really quite easy. Stickers.
Yeah, so when someone wants to eliminate that 75% from a potential listing, mistakes get made if it wasn't prepped properly. And that very precious teddy bear could have gone into a miscellaneous box and gone deep into the belly of storage. There are circumstances then which, when you're looking at a picture like this and you're saying, okay, I have, you know, 100 boxes. Where is it? And that's where a proper experienced move manager comes into play, because my company and my team will be able to say it's in box 1 or it's in box 56 with a picture. That takes a lot of experience and planning. And if someone throws a whole bunch of stuff into storage, which happens randomly, takes a whole bunch of life and takes a van load and puts it into a offsite storage, it's sometimes years before they have the mental space to come back and undo it. So if the teddy bear went into the mover's storage, or the passport, which sometimes happens, you know, the client forgets to take the passport out of the secret compartment of the desk, and the desk got packed and it got wrapped beautifully and it's sitting in storage, and then they go to travel internationally and they're like, where's my passport? Oh, my passport's in that 75% of the stuff that we left and it's in the secret drawer. Shit, you know, and they need to go and get the passport out of storage, which means it's never the first piece in the storage. You've got to take apart the whole thing. So that's what happens to not be.
A question. I'm sorry, Sonia from Gloria. I guess this is for both of you. What about timing? If a client calls you when the contract is signed, how soon can you get the house vacant?
Dale, you want to, I mean.
Sure. That's a good question. So it's all about timing. So let's just talk about, when do people move? The majority of the moves tend to happen in the summer. They will go somewhere between Memorial Day and Labor Day and add, you know, on the East Coast anyway, we'll talk about just the East Coast since we're talking about the Hudson Valley, and add a month onto either side of that. And the reason behind that is that tends to be when children are on vacation from school. It's a break. People just have a little bit more flexibility. So to answer that question directly, if you called me on Monday and the person needed to be out of their house on Tuesday, the last week in June, it would be nearly impossible. If you called me in February to do that, could I do it? I could do it, but it might not be the smoothest move that you've ever had because there's not been that pre-planning time. So I would say in worst case scenario, if you absolutely needed to get out, you should call the mover as soon as you know. But if not, a week would be the shortest lead time that I would recommend. But I would say, 6 weeks notice is probably a good guideline.
So typically in Manhattan, where a lot of our work is done,
Sure.
the real estate agent has, when you get the contract, it's either 30, 60, or 90-day term for closing. So at that point, if we have not been involved in the pre-marketing or the getting it to market, and it has been shown and sold with the detritus of 30 years in someone's space, that is a bigger ask than someone who lives in a pied-à-terre, like a hotel style circumstance. So I got a phone call last week from a real estate agent desperate because the closing is May 12th and his client is dragging his heels and he wants his commission. And he said, I need him to be out by the 11th because we have a walkthrough on the 12th. So can you get him out? So I looked at the listing and I called and got him a move quote, and he can be out and packed in 2 days and 1 day of loading. And he's already organized and inventoried. So there's 3 days, 4 days in that, but he's planning 2 weeks in advance, right. 2.5 weeks in advance. So to really, timing is all about volume of muck and what the life circumstance, which goes back to the original points in this presentation, which is the executive function and the preparation. Because if they've done the work and culled out what's there, we have another listing in Manhattan where we did all the work last July. It has just sold and been passed by the board, and we have 6 weeks. But we did all the work and everything is living in storage. And and now that they have a new home in California, we will be able to review what is in storage and decide, are we actually shipping that cross country or not? And then what was left in the apartment can be lifted in 2 days, packed, loaded, and lifted, and joined with what is currently in storage. So under a week based on elevators and circumstance. So timing can be instant, or it can take the 30, 60, 90 days, depending on how prepared they were. I hope that.
Yeah, a general rule of thumb that we typically give our clients is it's always easier to move a date when you have a date. So as soon as you know that there's a potential for a move, and if, I wasn't focused necessarily on Manhattan, but even in Manhattan, if you're in a large building, you need to reserve elevators in order for the movers to even be able to get in. So the best rule of thumb would be to pre-plan, book as early as you can. It's always easier, and there's no cost to move a date as long as you're staying in non-overtime hours. There's no cost to take a date off a calendar. So we always, when we do our intake calls with families that are moving, we will say to them, please give us a projected date so that we put it on our dispatch so we know to anticipate it. It's always easier to remove it if for some reason their life circumstances have taken them in another direction and they're not going to move with us. But if we've done the pre-move survey, most good movers will not charge to do an on-site survey because, again, it's a partnership, knowing what to expect, knowing what materials are needed, knowing what crates to build in advance. It's showing up prepared. So, if you called me on Monday and said, I need to be out on Tuesday, that's going to be a much different experience for that family that's moving than if you called me 3 months in advance and said, I don't know the exact move date, but let's put a projection on there. So I hope we've appropriately answered the timing, if there's any questions on that.
Can anyone else have any more questions? I just wanted to interject my own advice because I've moved several times. If you have valuables, like I have crystal that my mom had given me, and only one really, really nice painting, I always let the movers pack that because they do a better job than I do, and I've never had any problems with it. So that's my little piece of advice. If you have valuables, let someone else pack it for you.
And the movers will often ask what the value is, and they're going to ask you to sign on or sign off for insurance. Having awareness of what your homeowners covers in transit is also a very important thing. Does your homeowners or renters insurance cover goods in transit? If not, what is the value of that painting and the crystals, so that when the movers ask, are you taking out any extra insurance, you can put a value to it and have that covered if you need to play it doubly, triply safe. Or they're going to ask you to opt out. So those are other little tidbits. That's the more.
We have one more question from Gloria about elevators. Do you take furniture apart to fit into elevators?
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's, you know, one of the best questions that we ask people is, when you moved in, did it fit in the elevator? Or did you order it and was it assembled into the room in which it is? And obviously, you know, New York City, pre-war buildings, that is the talent of the estimator, to ask the right questions and get the right answers. And we even had a situation on the Upper West Side where everything got moved in, but then they changed the size of the elevator. The person had lived in the building for so long. So yes, and in many cases, yes, in many cases, we pre-plan that. So we will hire what's called a third-party provider. Again, we're talking about those trusted partners, because specifically a piano, depending on if it's a baby grand piano, is it an upright piano, does it need to go through the window with hoisting? There's so many things that come up in a move. Most movers will not disassemble IKEA furniture, particle board. And we set those expectations at the time of the estimate. And usually a mover will ask that the family or the client sign a waiver on those items. But anything that was disassembled to move in can be disassembled to move out and would be reassembled in the new location, and typically would be projected for inside the estimate. Whether that's domestically or internationally. And of course, there's unknowns if the person doesn't yet have a destination residence, right? Yeah. In terms of if it's a 6th floor walk up or what might be involved in that. So the answer is yes, we do.
I see Andrea's question about the comment as an organizer about the sofa on the top of the elevator. That's great. That happens. Most buildings of the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side, the Park Avenue, Fifth Avenue buildings won't allow that anymore after some major issues, because the smaller buildings, the lower income buildings, they will allow that because they have to. But the riding on top of an elevator is a really scary thing, and it requires a certain staff to do that, but it's had to happen. I mean, we've had clients buy whole apartments and not measure their art collection
from the current tenant if they had any issues. With
someone's
that.
on thing, but they
no, if you know,
please
that
be
was
on mute.
A
Whoever's
problem.
talking, please mute
I think,
themselves. I'll try to find out who it is and mute them.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's no doubt
S-O-N-Y-A,
that it doesn't look
Sonia.
good, but
Who is it? I'm sorry.
yeah, again, because
another
it's
Sonia. You have
Another
three
Sonia. I got it.
Sonias.
Sorry about that. People just don't listen.
It's okay.
There was another thing in here. Oh, Esther had asked, do you set up tech systems and take them apart? I guess meaning like computer systems.
You need a vendor for that. Typically, we would prep it and label it and inventory it. Dale's team or move team would protect it and pack it properly, but the reconfiguring it is not considered furniture. It's not considered something that would be reinstalled and made to function. But my team works with coordinating the vendors, all vendors that are needed for relocation, and an IT person or a a tech guru is what can be brought in.
Right. From the mover standpoint, to mirror what Sonia said, depending on what it is, right? So it's not infrequent, Continuum typically focuses on residential moves, but on occasion we might be asked to move a small office. And our requirements are always, especially if it's a trading floor, anything of high technology, straight down to musical components. It really just depends. We will ask the individual to have everything disconnected. And if they are not comfortable doing that, we would bring in an outside specialist that focuses on that specific type of technology at origin and at destination. And it would, again, fall under a trusted partner.
Yeah, it takes a village. And that goes back to the opening conversation as you get the listing. What's happening here? Are we in an estate? Are we distributing things to family and friends? Are we moving a small office? Are we divorcing? Are we downsizing? What are we doing and what are the end goals? Because that's the circumstance when you start to put in, oh, we're keeping our items. We need to set it up in the new place. Okay, what kind of specialty items do we need? I see another question about the elevators. Of course, elevators are padded and protected.
Yeah.
But every building is different. I mean, if some people can put things on tops of elevators, other buildings don't allow it. Other things need to be hoisted. Some things need to be taken apart completely and then carried up and reassembled upstairs like magic. That's the team. And there are hundreds of vendors in play.
Right, just an insight from the mover on how that's handled. Typically, so if you're talking about a building that has elevators, as opposed to an individual home that might have an elevator in it, what typically happens is there's either a superintendent or there's a administrative office that the mover will reach out to, and they fill out what's called a COI, which is a certificate of insurance. And part of that is discussing the covering of elevators and floors, not just in the elevators, but in the hallways of the building. It could be marble floors, it could be carpeting. Typically it's done with masonite. And a good mover will have that information, will have the necessary resources to do that. Some buildings, like if you take the new building in Rye, the St. Regis that was just built, they're gonna have their own floor protection in most cases. But then when you go into the private apartment, the mover needs to have that. The mover needs to protect the floors. I hope that's helpful.
I see someone else's question about a typical packing moving time. There is no typical. There is no, I mean, it could be an afternoon. It could be, we've done jobs which are with multiple trucks and multiple weeks of packing. So it all comes down to going back to the life circumstance, an average job, 2 to 3 days of packing and 1 day of loading.
Right, just to give you an idea in terms of days and times and size of move. So if you look at a typical 1-bedroom apartment and the person's neither a hoarder nor a minimalist, let's just say straight down the norm. If they were moving from Rye to Darien, chances are we could pack it in the morning, truck it and deliver it in the afternoon and have it unpacked, because you're talking about 4,500 pounds of household goods. But as soon as you took that same move and go to New York City, there are regulated hours in terms of the elevators. And also you need to project for traffic. You have to project for the unknown. And honestly, I'm sure we've all experienced the move that starts at 6:30 in the morning and ends at 9 o'clock at night. You want to avoid that because that adds to stress. People are tired. You have to remember that the men might be working and it could be a day like today, unexpected 85 degrees. you have to give the teams the time to do their job correctly. People always want to move quickly, but that's where chaos sets in. So that is the talent of whether it be Sonia with organizing or whether it be the mover directly, setting up the program for success. And sometimes it can be, the person needs to be out by X date. We can send 2 men in for a week, every day, for 3 hours a day when the baby's not sleeping, if it's prepared correctly, and work with the family. It's all about planning. It's
Executive function planning. It goes
the worst
back.
The worst thing in moving you can do is do it in a rush. It can be done, but anything done in a rush and not packed well is not going to deliver well. So the time really needs to be put in to organize.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I was reading some comments of excellent presentation. It certainly was. And I think we got a lot of great tips on organizing and moving. And as I said, we're recording this so that we can send the link out later to everyone who is here and all those who were not able to attend. But I want to thank both you, Dale and Sonia, for your time, and thank all of you for watching. And you'll have their contact information on the recording, or if you want to jot it down now, or if you don't get it, you can always email me and I will be happy to send it to you. So thank you all so much, and go out and have a wonderful day.
Thank
Go
you
enjoy
very
the
much.
beautiful
Thank you,
weather.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.